I made my best jam game yet in 48 hours, and it wasn't because of mechanics. I made a game for the Ludum Dare 58 game jam with the theme Collector, and I want to tell you about it. This video is split into chapters if you want to jump around, and stick till the end to learn the lesson that made this the best jam for me yet. My original weekend plans were cancelled at the last moment, so I jumped into the Ludum Dare compo version and I learned that the theme was Collector. Honestly, this was such an exciting theme for me, I immediately had so many ideas. Aside from just making a game during the weekend, I also had my own goals. You see, in the past I usually focused too much on game mechanics. I love crafting virtual worlds with my own rules, crafting game mechanics and then letting players play in the sandbox that I create. But as a result, my games often don't look that great and don't feel that great to play. They have mechanics that interact with each other, but the graphics are not so great. Usually I don't have time to put in music or even sounds. So this time I had a different goal for the game I would create this weekend. I wanted to make something tiny, polished, with nice art, pretty, with good sound effects, and I definitely wanted to add in music. Also, I spent a few days before the game jam studying sock pop games. Do you know sock pop? I love how their games look and feel to play. And they have, I think, this philosophy of making tiny, polished toys. So I set a goal for myself this game jam. Make a tiny, polished toy, rather than a big, unfinished idea. Let me tell you how the weekend went. Day 1. The mechanics. I had a couple of ideas for games I could make. In the end, I decided to go with the idea of collecting resources. It would be a chill, cozy, idle, incremental game, I guess. It's heavily inspired by sock pop games, but also by Majesty. In Majesty, you don't have direct control over your units, but you just give them commands and then the units follow them autonomously. I liked this idea and I wanted the player to just chill back and click to give a command, and the units in the game would automatically perform the command, collect resources and move on their own. This was actually a very chill day for me. I took it really slow, I relaxed, I went to the gym, I cooked a steak. I mostly spent the day implementing the bear mechanics. I also had this idea that the player would start in a small circular world and it would slowly expand as you gather more and more resources and complete simple tasks. This way the game starts really small and focused and there's not that much going on, so it's actually really easy to figure out what to do. And as you progress, it expands and more options are added and more resources are spawned in the world. So I implemented the single building that is at the center of the world. That's like the village for the player where everything is collected and the world expands around it. I implemented a simple state machine for the villagers in the game and also implemented the option to click to spawn a command. Whenever a command is spawned in the world, it looks near it for resources and assigns jobs to the resources, and then the villagers pick these jobs and perform them. I guess that's a complicated way of saying that you click to spawn a command and then the villagers go to the command and collect resources nearby. I actually made a key decision at this moment, because in the past I would usually rely heavily on procedural generation and I wanted to make the game deep and long to play. But I have learned many times and I read many times online that actually during a game jam most people only play for a couple of minutes. So the key decision that I made this time is to make a short, polished gameplay and small, handcrafted world, rather than rely on procedural generation and randomness. And I think that this paid off big time and taught me a big lesson for game jams. At the end of the day, I pretty much had all mechanics in the game, but I was only using placeholder art, colored boxes, and there was no sounds, of course, or anything. It was bare bones as it could be. And it wasn't fun. So that day after dinner in the evening, I just sat down with my iPad, I opened Procreate and I just started doodling art for the game. As I've mentioned, a huge inspiration for my game were the sock pop games and the way their games look and feel to play. So when I was prototyping the art for my game, I was referencing their games, screenshots from their games heavily. Can you guess which of their games were my biggest inspiration? I drew a couple of sprites of the trees, stones, mock-up of how the world would look and the village in the center. And finally, I spent some time drawing the villagers. And this was actually the most difficult because I had no idea how to make them look. So once again, I looked to Sock Pop games for inspiration and I chose a very simple shape of the villagers and also a very simple animations and sprite frames for them. In my previous game, Lasso Sheriff, I heavily relied on squishy animations, transitions, moving the sprites, scaling them for animations of the units. It looked amazing and I had to draw, I think, just 2 frames. So I decided to go with the same style for this game as well. I drew only, I think, 2 or 3 frames for the villagers and the rest of the animations are done in the engine, just scaling the sprite, rotating it and doing nice transitions. Day 2. On the second day, I had a ton of work ahead of myself and I was under a lot more pressure. The first thing I did was that I exported all the sprites I drew last evening and I put them into the game. And oh boy, the game transformed like day and night. So I imported the sprites for everything in the game. Then I set up the animations with squishy scales, rotating the sprites, etc. And the game was actually coming alive. Then I sat down and gathered a bunch of sound effects for the game. I put them into the game and oh boy, the game was totally different. It's actually quite fascinating because it was the same game that I made on Saturday, same game mechanics. But just by adding art and sound effects, it felt completely different to play. It was actually a lot of fun. By the evening I was exhausted and I was scrambling to get the game done. I didn't have the upgrade mechanic in yet and also no music yet, but I was already happy with what I had and I was ready to submit it if I ran out of time or energy. So next up I wanted to add some simple music into the game. It was obvious that I didn't really have any time to produce any nice soundtrack or anything like that. So I decided to rely on procedural music. And the idea was actually really simple. I opened Ableton and I just played around with a couple of sounds and instruments until I found something that I think fit the game really well. And I liked it. It's the bell sound that you can hear while the game is playing. I quickly chose a scale. I think I went with B minor for the game. And I just played a couple of tones. Actually, I created a bunch of audio tracks in Ableton and on each one I created one sample. Most of the samples just play 1 or 2 tones in sequence, some of them play chords. Then I exported all of these audio samples separately and imported them into the game. I created a really simple music player which just randomly takes one of the samples, plays it, then waits for a random number of seconds, plays another random sample, and this just loops while the game is running. There's a quick lesson I learned here, because the first thing that I tried actually was to export single tones from Ableton, and I had the game play just these single notes randomly, but the result was too chaotic, too random. It didn't sound good at all, even though the notes were all in the same scale. So I learned that actually I had to create a bunch of samples which contain a sequence of notes or chords, and then I have the game play these clips, which are sequences, and it sounds much better. By this time I think it was 11 p.m. in the night and the deadline was midnight, so I had about 1 hour to implement the whole upgrade mechanic. Yes, I added the upgrade mechanic 1 hour before the deadline. Nothing strange about that. So I had the mechanic implemented actually quite quickly, but I was having so much issue with trying to build the UI for it, because I drew cards for the upgrades and I also drew a simple animated background, that like a shining effect that would be displayed behind the cards, and I found it so difficult to actually display that shining background sprite behind the cards, and not have it interfere with actually being able to click on the buttons. I'm a web developer professionally, so the idea of making this was like super simple. On the web you just use absolute positioning and disable cursor events and set a negative Z index, for example. But in Godot, I had to do it a little bit differently. Oh no! Oh no, I have a bad background. Whatever. So actually the way to implement this is very simple in Godot. I was maybe just thinking about it incorrectly, but I made the upgrade card by using a center container to display the two sprites, one for the sprite of the card and one for the icon of the upgrade. And then this is the solution to my problem. The sprite of the background shining effect is a child of the sprite of the card, and then I lower its order and I disable cursor events. And that's it. I manually positioned it to be centered behind the card. That's all. Actually quite simple in the end, but it took me forever to figure out. I submitted the game 5 minutes before the deadline. I was exhausted, but very happy with what I was able to achieve. Then I spent the next submission hour to make more builds of the game and upload them, write all the descriptions for all the pages, take a couple of screenshots, upload them. In the end, I went to sleep at around 2 a.m. Results. I don't know the final scores yet, but so far the comments I got on the game were overwhelmingly positive. Everyone universally loved how the game feels to play, how the game looks, the ambience, the sound effects, even the music fits really well. What's actually a really good sign for me is that most people, when they finished playing the game, they wanted more. They were surprised that the game already ended. One of my friends told me that the game felt like it was a proper demo of Steam, not just a game jam game. And even my girlfriend, when she was playing the game, was smiling the whole time and finished playing the game with a big smile on her face. And she never even plays games. So yeah, the feedback was really, really great. And I feel like I should really make this game into a proper demo. Lessons learned. Honestly, this game jam went so well that I'm gonna use it as a template for my next game jams. My main goal of making a tiny polished toy instead of a big unfinished idea made me focused and also made me reduce the scope of the game so much that I left myself enough time for polishing, for art, sound effects, and also for adding music. Game mechanics have always been my strength in the past and I used to rely on them heavily. But now I see that this never really worked well for the game jam format. It made me sacrifice too much on art and audio. Studying sock pop games before the game jam was such a great idea. It made me learn how they use colors, how they make their games look so nice, so pretty, what makes their games really nice to play. And it inspired me to do the same. I think that sock pop also links into making tiny polished toys rather than big, deep, complex games. In the past, I used to heavily rely on procedural generation because I was trying to make a longer experience with more replayability. But now I understand that most players in a game jam only play for a couple of minutes at best. So a much better strategy is to focus on handcrafted worlds and experiences and a short, polished gameplay time. The hand-drawn art that I made in Procreate worked really well, and I gotta admit I can't really draw. I'm more of a programmer than artist. This is why it's even more important that I used other games for reference and for inspiration. And as I said, I was heavily inspired by sock pop games, how they look, how their sprites look, how they work with colors, and frankly the simplicity of how their games look. So I tried keeping things really simple and drawing a couple of basic shapes, cute sprites, flat shading. The only shading in my game are the shadows below objects, giving it a little bit of depth. Sound effects. These made a day and night difference in how the game feels to play. Without sounds, the game looked nice, but didn't really feel that great to play. But with the added sound effects, it's a whole different experience. This is actually one of the biggest lessons for me from this game jam. It's not just about the visuals, but also the audio. I would maybe argue that the audio and the sound effects and the music are even more important than how the game looks. And finally, the semi-procedural music I put in. It's a super minimalistic, simple music in the background, just for the ambience and for the atmosphere of the game. I made it by just picking a sound and instrument that I liked and then recording a couple of clips which are just sequences of notes and a couple of chords, and then the game plays these samples randomly and waits a random amount of time between them. I think it really paid off. The result is this soft occasional melody that comes in and makes the game feel chill, spacious, maybe a little mysterious too. What did not go great? Honestly, there's not much to say here, because a lot of the things went really well. But if I had to choose anything, it's the standard stuff for my games. There's no tutorial in the game, there's no pause menu. I just didn't really have the time to implement these, and frankly, these were not a big priority for me. The mechanic of making the world start small and slowly expand as you collect more resources makes the game really simple to understand, so frankly, there's no need for a separate tutorial. One audio bug managed to slip through as I was submitting the game. As I was exporting the individual clips from Ableton for the music, one of the clips got exported incorrectly and it contained all the clips inside of it, so it was super loud and super noisy. So what would happen in the game is that you would be playing, the music would occasionally come in, and at some point it would play this super loud, super noisy clip, which would blow your ears off. I thought that this was an issue with Godot, but no, just a wrong clip. So I figured it out on the next day and the fix was actually really simple. Outro. This was my best game jam yet, and it actually gave me a template for all of my future game jams. The idea of a polished, tiny toy rather than a big unfinished idea, focusing more on the audio part and also making the games look pretty, nice, polished, feel great to play. This is a template that I will use for all of my future games. As I've said, I have received so much positive feedback for the game that I'm seriously considering making it into a proper demo version that I can then publish on Steam. So if you'd like to see this, well, first of all, subscribe. But also let me know down in the comments what would you like to see in the demo version. The Game Jam version of Outward is online for you to play, so if you want to experience it, the link is down below the like button. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you are interested in the game and want to see what the journey to a proper demo looks like, make sure to subscribe. And let me know what are your favorite jam lessons down in the comments.